Hey everyone, it's John here from RPO Bay Hockey to give you my 2019-2020 fantasy tips, whether it's sleepers, busts, or musts in how you draft for your fantasy hockey this year, or whether it's through trade or waiver pickups. I'm going to talk about it, so definitely if you are here and you're new to the channel, please do subscribe, drop a like, and comment your thoughts. So let me know what you think, if there's other players that I didn't mention in these scenarios. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of players, maybe I missed some, but I like doing this video. I did it last year more professionally, but I like doing this video just in general. So hopefully you enjoy, and let's get into a few sleepers. So sleepers are players sometimes people are not familiar with. So I included a few pictures for just the sleepers I think are going to have good years. So let's go through the first couple. Rope Hintz with the Dallas Stars. I think he's going to potentially be on the top power play unit, but for sure in the top six. He just stepped onto the scene, and with guys in the top six like Pavelski, Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Alex Radulov, he's going to have help around him. He's a younger player. He can play on the wing. He can play up the middle, and I do think he's going to have a lot of success, and if you can draft him later in the rounds, that's definitely an option. And just the fact that he has the different positioning as well on fantasy. Victor Olofsson. So this is one I just look at and go, man, if he plays with Jack Eichel, if he gets the power play time, this guy has a ridiculous shot, especially if you have goal priorities on your fantasy. This is a guy that could, in my opinion, rack over 30 goals. So this is a guy that I could see maybe 14th, 15th round. If you could draft him later in your fantasy, that's something you should consider. And then Neil Pionk. So obviously a lot of Winnipeg Jets fans didn't like the trade. You're trading Jacob Trouba. Neil Pionk was the player coming back. And yes, at face value, Neil Pionk's probably a fifth guy or fourth guy. He's no more than a fourth defenseman on most playoff teams. If you're talking about a defensive guy, that's not Neil Pionk. You're talking about strictly offensive power play specialist guy. Neil Pionk on most playoff teams is at most a 4. But what's weird about this whole situation is for the Winnipeg Jets, he's a number 2, and he is going to be their number 1 power play guy if Dustin Byfuglien does not return. Jacob Trouba's gone, Tyler Myers is gone, Ben Sherratt's gone. This guy went from being potentially the 4th or 5th defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets to being the number 2. So Josh Morrissey is probably their best defenseman right now, and then it slides to Neil Pionk if Dustin Byfuglien does not return. So if you can draft Neil Pionk somewhere in your draft, whether it's later or if you feel comfortable with him being the better defensive option, he's going to get a lot of power play time. I mean, top power play minutes, and he's going to be their number 1 point producer on the back end, unless Morrissey has a breakout year offensively, and if Dustin Byfuglien, like I said, does not return. And then one I would say for a goalie would be either Jonas Korpisalo or Elvis Merzlikins. So whoever starts for the Columbus Blue Jackets, that's someone you want to pick up. The Blue Jackets are not going to be this horrible team. I still think at the very least they're going to be a fringe playoff team or just kind of out on the outside. I think there's no chance that team slides all the way to the bottom of the East or all the way to the bottom of the Metro. I just don't see it. I think their offense is still very good. Their defense is still one of the best in the East, in my opinion. So I just don't see it going down in that way. But who knows? But I do think, especially in the later rounds, or if you see goaltending falling fast, I would look at either Korpisalo or Merzlikins. I would say Korpisalo has the edge. He's the veteran. He's older. I think he could have like a 60-40 percentage in terms of games played, but we'll see what happens with that goalie tandem. So let's talk about some other sleepers. So James Neal is one. He's older, obviously, he's established. He had a really rough year last year, but if you can get him in the very late rounds, it might be something to consider, especially if you can play both positions. And just the fact that James Neal could be playing maybe on the top line or with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, get some power play time as well, I would consider him as an option. Ryan Donato, Kyle Turris. Donato obviously going to play maybe in a top 6 role for the Minnesota Wild. Kyle Turris maybe on the wing in a top 6 role. Pavel Buchnevich, maybe if you look at Buchnevich being on the top line with Panarin and Zibanejad, I wouldn't consider Buchnevich maybe a sleeper, but I do think sometimes people forget about him, and now especially considering he'll be on the top line, I think you can't miss out on him. So maybe a sleeper must, I guess you would call. Connor Brown. So this one's maybe a little bit of a hot take, but if Connor Brown plays out the year on the top line with Brady Tkachuk and Colin White, I think he's a major sleeper to get 25, 30 goals, maybe 55, 60 points. Again, it's Connor Brown we're talking about. Yes, he got 20 goals in his rookie year, but last year, that's nowhere near what he got. So who knows? But Connor Brown was also playing 4th line minutes last year compared to a top 6 role or a top line role with Ottawa Senators. A few in the Western Conference, Jack Roslovic, Sam Bennett, Andre Kasha, all players that are kind of finally establishing themselves. More Andre Kasha in the games he played than his injury, and then Jack Roslovic, if A guy like Patrick Laine, Kyle Connor, they're not signed as I make this video. Jack Roslovic could be a great pickup. He could play on that top power play unit potentially with those guys out. And then you're looking at another guy like Sam Bennett, who's going to play in the top 6, and he keeps on improving. You see the struggles he had like 2 years ago, but now he's improving. So again, these are guys that maybe more Sam Bennett and Roslovic that you would catch in the later rounds. Andre Kasha would be a guy I would really look out for him being one of the main producers for the Anaheim Ducks. And then a few goalies on top. I would say Jack Campbell, Mike Smith, and Carter Hart's not really a sleeper, but don't forget about Carter Hart. I am really high on the Flyers this year. I think Carter Hart's going to be the starting goaltender for most of the year. So look at Carter Hart. Mike Smith is an option just because I think if you're looking at Koskinen struggles, I think Mike Smith could get in on a lot of games. So maybe as a second or third goalie option if you get stuck in terms of drafting for goalies. And then Jack Campbell. Who knows what's going to happen with Jonathan Quick? And I'm not saying that the LA Kings are going to be good in any sense, but again, if Jack Campbell's a pickup or just a late draft, if you're stuck in terms of goaltending, I think Jack Campbell, if Jonathan Quick isn't fully healthy or maybe a trade throughout the year, Jack Campbell could get a lot of games like he did last year. Now let's talk about busts. It's very difficult sometimes to kind of evaluate what you would call a bust. I think for me, and how I say this list, it's just kind of looking at players and their success last year and the drop that they're going to have this upcoming year. So one would be David Krejci. He had 73 points last year. I just really don't see him matching that. I think he could be anywhere around 50, 60 points at the very max. So just don't be looking out for David Krejci in the top 2 rounds or top 3 or 4 rounds. I just don't think that's a smart move. Obviously, I think if you're talking about mid to late rounds, if David Krejci's still there, you don't think twice about it. I just think in all perspectives, you're looking at younger guys to break out past David Krejci this upcoming year. And then just some of the RFAs, I think if you're looking at Rantanen and Laine, that's a huge risk if you're going into your drafting and trying to draft these guys if they're going to be out for a couple months in the season. Again, I'm making this video before those guys have signed. Who knows if they've signed once you watch this video. And again, I wanted to make this video earlier, but I know there's going to be drafting over the next few days, over the next week, and of course, just in terms of waiver wire, like I said, in trades, this is all advice for you guys. Erik Gustafsson for the Chicago Blackhawks. Wow, this guy exploded. Obviously got a lot of power play time. I just think he could be a bust in himself in saying that he's not going to have a repeat year in what he did. He had an offensive explosion, but do not rely on this guy in the top rounds. I don't even know if I would draft this guy in the mid rounds. Maybe you get him in the later rounds. I just think there's a lot of other defensemen that struggled last year, and if you look at Erik Gustafsson, he just will play power play, and that could be a good option to still draft. I just think you shouldn't get this guy in the top 5 rounds. And then Mark Giordano, I think Giordano, not a bust in any sense, but we've seen Giordano have a really good year and then drop off. Good year, drop off. I think that's going to be a scenario here where he just won the Norris Trophy. I cannot see him living up to the hype of last year. So again, rely on other defensemen that are still on the board, whether it's an Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, Morgan Riley, John Klingberg. Rely on those defensemen way more than you would draft a guy like Mark Giordano. And then Thomas Tatar. So Tatar had a really good year with the Montreal Canadiens. I just think other guys are going to step up over him. I think he may even drop down the lineup if other players outperform him. You have younger guys like Ryan Poehling, Nick Suzuki, who I think are going to have good years in their rookie years. So I just think Tatar's too much of a risk. I think with his great year, maybe some fantasy owners want to kind of jump ahead and look at the Montreal Canadiens, and after Duran or Domi, they go right to Tatar. I just think slow down on that front, and I think Tatar might not be the best option to draft mid-round or higher than that. And then Zach Parise. I think Parise keeps getting older. I don't think the Minnesota Wild are going to be a playoff team this upcoming year. I think they're more underrated than people are looking at them, but I just think Zach Parise, he had an insane part of the year, exploded offensively. I just don't see that going down again. They have younger players that I think will step up. So again, I don't think you should rely on Zach Parise. And then a goalie bust would be Semyon Varlamov. I just really look at the New York Islanders. I think there's potential that they're going to have a drop-off year, and then Thomas Greiss is there as well. I just think in terms of the goalie situation, splitting games, I don't think Varlamov can hold his own, potentially, struggle with Grubauer taking his role. So I just think Varlamov's too much of a risk, and I would have him as a bust. Maybe you would want to get him, again, later in the rounds, but I just think he's a bust if you're really high on him to get in the first half of the draft. And then let's talk about some musts quick. So John Klingberg, I think that's a for sure must. One of the best offensive defensemen in the league today, and he's kind of by himself in terms of offense. Miro Heiskanen is definitely growing in that direction. Heiskanen, I would say, is more two-way, and he's going to be a ridiculous stud defenseman for years to come, but I just think Klingberg is going to get the heavy power play minutes, and I'm really excited about Klingberg. And then Rasmus Dahlin, I think with the struggles of Ristolainen, and then looking at the rest of their defensemen, I think Dahlin is their pure offense from the back, and I really like his potential for this upcoming year, getting on the power play, getting top minutes in the top pair. So I think Dahlin is a must. And then Mike Hoffman, he's on his contract year, 1 year left on his contract, and I think with the Florida Panthers just improving consistently, they got their goaltender. I think they're going to have a really good year. So I think Mike Hoffman is a must in the first few rounds. And then Logan Couture. So Logan Couture, he's the new captain. Joe Pavelski left. I would really look at the San Jose Sharks and pick Logan Couture as a must. So definitely if Logan Couture is there, talking 70, 80 points, coming off that playoff run he just had, I would go Logan Couture for sure. And then a couple centers, Evgeny Malkin and Jack Eichel. Different situations. Evgeny Malkin just had kind of a rough year, and I think a lot of people are kind of overlooking the fact that it's Evgeny Malkin. I mean, a top 100 player, Evgeny Malkin, one of the best centers, in my opinion, still in the game. And I think, honestly, if you're looking at Evgeny Malkin, he's going to have a bounce-back year. So if he's still there by, in my opinion, like round 4, don't even second-guess it. Go for Evgeny Malkin. If he's in 3 or 4, I think you go right ahead. And then Jack Eichel, whether he's playing with Skinner, whether he's playing with Olofsson, I think Jack Eichel, again, one of the premier centers, at least in the Eastern Conference, in the league as well, top 20 for sure. So if Jack Eichel is there in the first few rounds, definitely look at drafting him. And I do think the Buffalo Sabres will have a better year. And then a couple more defensemen, and then a winger, and then 2 goalies. So Erik Karlsson and Thomas Chabot. So Chabot, the main offensive producer for the Ottawa Senators coming up. I think that is a must in the top 5 rounds. Erik Karlsson, a lot of people forget about him. I think he could finally get back to his form this upcoming year. So definitely Erik Karlsson is a must. And then Artemi Panarin, he's already looked ridiculous in a New York Rangers uniform. Preseason has been ridiculous. I think Panarin's going to be the number 1 guy all year for Rangers in terms of offense. I think that's a guy you definitely draft. And then a couple goalies. I think Andrei Vasilevskiy and Sergei Bobrovsky. I think both teams coming out of Florida, they have very good defenses. And obviously the Tampa Bay Lightning a bit better than the Panthers, but I think Ekblad's going to have a bounce-back year. You got a veteran in Stralman. I just think Bobrovsky's going to strive in Florida. I think Vasilevsky's going to have another crazy year. And those are the 2 guys, in my opinion, you can definitely rely on this upcoming year. So thank you for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I think for the fantasy, it is difficult. I was just kind of going through my opinion, the players I think are going to have good years, the sleepers, the players that are going to have drop-offs in terms of busts. So you can let me know your thoughts. Again, if you are new, please do subscribe. Drop a like. This was John from RPO Bay Adelaide. Have a good one. Peace out.